Good evening, everyone. My name is Be Manzini, and I'm your host for this very special Q&A. I'm a poet and a filmmaker and the director of Caramel Film Club, and we spotlight films with Black talent. So it's a perfect place for me to be this evening, and you. I would like to welcome Timothy Greenfield-Sanders, who is the director of Toni Morrison, The Pieces I Am. We're going to have a conversation for about half an hour, and audience questions are welcomed. Hi, Timothy.
Hi there.
Good to see you. You're
Good to
based
see
in
you.
Yeah, you're based in New York, aren't you?
I am a long-time New Yorker.
Indeed. So the first question that I have for you, I mean, this is such a intimate, inspirational, and tender film of a monumental person. And I'm curious that you guys were friends for a long period of time, but how did you approach Tony with this idea to do a documentary?
I first met Toni in 1981, nearly 40 years ago. She had come to my studio in the East Village. I had a little portrait studio then. I'm a photographer slash filmmaker. And I did her portrait, and people have asked me what I remember. It was so long ago, but what I do remember is her confidence, that she was, as a subject, incredibly sure of herself in front of the camera. And photographers look for that because you're always trying to make your subject feel comfortable. And Toni didn't need anything. She was very assured, self-assured. And we became friends that day. And I went on to kind of do portraits of her for book jackets and press. And we developed a long, long friendship. So it was, it wasn't until 2014 that I actually asked her if she would consider letting me make a film. And Toni had seen all of my films. There's so much to say here, but I did a series of identity films, first with African Americans called The Blacklist. And Toni was the first to sit for it. And it was inspired by her, actually. The whole idea came from a lunch we had together. But that's a whole other story. And when I asked her if she would consider it, she didn't say no. And I knew that was a yes, because Toni is direct. If she didn't want to do it, she would have said, not for me. But she didn't say no. She said, what would it involve? And I knew the door was opening. And it was really, her concern was, would it take up too much time from her own work? And I assured her that it wouldn't. And luckily, we got to the point where we made the film.
Mm. And, in terms of time frame, talk to us about, so you said 2014, you approached her with the idea, and how much footage did you have? How many hours? And I'm also curious, within that, did you have to kill any of your darlings? Because I'm assuming the wonderful talking head that she is, there must have been some amazing gems there that, because of time limits, you couldn't necessarily put in.
We had, you could make 10-hour film here. This is a 10-hour miniseries. We had 12 interviewees, all of whom were extraordinary, all of whom deserved more time in the film. We had a 13th person, which was Peter Sellers, and we ended up cutting him only because it was an easy way to take 7 minutes out of the film. We had this section on Shakespeare and Morrison that was riveting. Mm-hmm. It's in the DVD extras. And we ultimately decided we could pull it and save that time. It's a very challenging film to make because you're trying to really tell a very, very big story. Not only Toni, the great writer, the novelist, the Nobel winner, but Toni, the extraordinarily important editor at Random House, Toni, the single mother, the contributions that she made as a Black woman to society and to the culture. How do you tell that story? So 2 hours was tough to keep it limited like that.
Yeah, and it absolutely flew by. I've seen it several times now, and sitting in the cinema, and 2 hours just felt you know, like it went so quickly. I want to talk, you touched upon her importance and how monumental and her effect on the art world. And one of the things that I really wanted to speak about was the African American artists that you decided to put within the work, and also your use of archive. Really like the decision to have her front facing and then everyone else not quite looking at the camera.
Right.
All of these types of wonderful directorial decisions. Can you talk us through them?
Yeah, Toni looks direct to camera. And I had never seen a film where you mix that, where one person looks at camera and the others look off camera. And once you go down that road and you film it that way, you're stuck with it. But I felt that it would work. The identity films I mentioned, the list films, are all direct to camera. So I know the power of that. And I felt that it would make it so that it would be Toni telling her story and the others sort of talking about her. And it could work, I hoped. Well, I think it did work very, very well, because it does make you feel that Toni is in command and telling the story that she wants to tell. You talk about the art in the film. I reached out at one point. Well, let me back up. We were playing around in the editing room, and I was trying to see about an image, and I thought, well, why can't we use a painting here? So we played with it, and it seemed to work. And then it became almost a game of what painting we could substitute, because we felt that paintings never get used the way photographs do, or archival B-roll or something like that. But to cut to, say, Jacob Lawrence's Migration series, when we're talking about Toni's family leaving the South and moving to Ohio, what better image could you have than those magnificent paintings that Jacob Lawrence made about that exact subject? So as that started to work and I reached out to a lot of artists to get permissions, it was always the same. Toni Morrison, whatever you need. I love Toni Morrison. She's such an important influence on me as an artist. I would love to be part of this. So, it became almost a way of acknowledging that as well, that Toni's influence on the fine art world.
Mm. And can you tell us about your use of archive? I guess I'm particularly interested in when she's talking about the white male gaze and getting, that voice off your shoulder, and your decision to put that in, especially as a white male.
Well, what I thought was very powerful was the interviews that Toni had done historically. These incredibly interviews with Charlie Rose and Dick Cavett and Bill Moyers, all the white men who were in power and who were the lead interviewers of the day. And you see Toni as so strong and so in control of her narrative. And I thought it was very, very important to have some of that kind of footage, because, it's hard today to understand how difficult that was in the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s even, to be on television, be one of the very few Black women on television, and to talk the way Toni did. Thought it was very, very important to see that. So, I think the archival material in the film is extraordinary. Johanna Giebelhaus, who's the editor of the film, also was the chief researcher, and she got nominated for an Emmy for her research. So it was pretty damn good. We went to many, many archives and found extraordinary things, and you're always looking for something that's never been seen before. We found things like that in Lorain, the whole section on Lorain, Ohio. Johanna went out to Lorain and went to the library there and into their boxes and found photographs that hadn't never been scanned even, that had just been sitting there, that were very much imagery of when Toni lived there, what the streets looked like, what it was like when she grew up in Lorain.
Mm. You talked about the Emmy nomination, which brings me to the soundtrack and the music. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I keep taking my glasses off. We were very, very fortunate to discover the brilliant Catherine Bostic, who is an LA-based African-American musician who's a member of the Motion Picture Academy. And I called her up out of the blue. We found her number, and I called her and I said, I'm doing this film on Toni Morrison and I'd like to talk to you about music. And she said, I'm getting goosebumps just hearing the name Toni Morrison. So we knew we had the right person. She turned out to be, a real genius. And if you listen to this soundtrack, it's a magnificent kind of sensibility, I think, of when to come in with music and when to go out with it. She wrote the song High Above the Water that was shortlisted for an Oscar. She was nominated for an Emmy for the soundtrack of the film, for the score of the film. I think making a film is a very complicated process. It's, aside from the editing, aside from finding all of these images, it's a matter of kind of bringing in the music just right and picking the perfect moment that someone says something. It's so complicated. And I think this film is very dense. You need to really watch it multiple times.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm on my third watch and I'm looking forward to my fourth, most definitely. I'm wanting to go to something that you mentioned in terms of her being part of the Blacklist and then opening the Women's List as well. And then you being her go-to photographer. Talk to us a little bit about working with her on those projects.
I think you could not make this film without a great amount of trust between the director and the subject. Toni trusted me with her story. It's an extraordinary thing to put on my shoulders. I think she knew that I could do it somehow, that I could raise the money to do it, that I would do it. I think she knew I could do it right. I feel that. When I was sitting in my kitchen, I talked about this slightly earlier, but we were doing portraits for Margaret Garner. Toni had written the libretto for the opera based on the beloved character of Margaret Garner. And she said, I've met so many Black divas, in this process. We should do a book called Black Divas, and you take the portraits and I'll write about it. And that idea morphed into the idea of the Blacklist, which was originally 25 African Americans from a very wide range of talents and worlds, and direct-to-camera interviews. And Toni was the kind of the guinea pig. She was the first to sit for it. I was still testing my backdrop and how I was going to shoot it. And it was the first time I had done direct-to-camera. And it turned out to be a very successful film that went on to make the Blacklist 2 and 3, the Latino list, the Out list, the Trans list, the Boomer list, the Women's list, like almost a factory of films like that. And when we made the Women's list, I said, Toni, would you write, I know you don't want to be on camera for this, but I need you to maybe read a minute about women, some kind of a statement. And she agreed to do it, and she wrote it, and we went up to her house on the river and recorded it and had wonderful lunch. But it was magnificent, that little minute. I think you can find it on YouTube probably.
Yeah, no, and Vimeo as well. I think that's where I saw it. Take us through what your intention was for the film, and in terms of this narrative that you wanted to build. And you mentioned the different aspects of Toni as a person, and that people often frame her in quite a one-dimensional way almost, and there's all of this richness. How did you go through the process of deciding what you wanted to highlight?
I felt that the subtitle, The Pieces I Am, which we took from Beloved, it's a line in Beloved, was a metaphor for Toni. And it was a metaphor for her life as well. And I think, that magnificent opening by Mickalene Thomas, the collage of Toni's face coming in and changing, and that beautiful opening sort of sets the stage for the film. And I wanted the film to be a collage. I wanted it to be something that reflected the way Toni writes, which is not linear in any way, that she moves around in time and space and character and narrator. And, you know, it is something that we wanted to pay homage to, in a sense, in our editing. So we did that by, you know, you start here and then you move to way over here in her life and you come back and forth. And I thought it was more interesting to do it that way and more appropriate.
No, definitely. And I guess I wanted to ask you about her work and your relationship with her work. And I don't know if you can pick just one of her works that you are particularly fond of. I think, yeah, I'm always enamored by Beloveds, not only in terms of the text in the book, but what they did with the film as well. Have you got a favorite 1, 2, or 3 in terms of her books?
You know, it's a great question. And we asked this question to everyone who sat for us. And I think the best answer was Fran Lebowitz, who said, my favorite Toni Morrison book, well, that would be, I'm not going to answer that. I refuse to answer that. You can't answer a question like that. So, you know, I kind of feel that way as well about my own work. People say, what's your favorite film you've made? Or what portrait of yours is your best portrait? And I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a body of work that I've done. And I think I look at Toni's work that way. You know, I kind of think she once said to me that jazz was her favorite book, that she thought that was her most innovative, successful book. You know, I'm not going to argue with her. I would say if you had never done anything but Beloved, that would be pretty impressive.
Definitely. I can see that we've got audience questions coming in, so I'm going to start to ask those, if that's okay with you, Timothy. Okay. Someone has asked, it's always hard making a film about someone's hero, and Toni Morrison is so important to so many people. What responses have you had from those in her life that she's changed and her work?
It's a lovely question. You know, Toni is an icon, and to people, she means so much. It's a bigger than life personality and person. And you know, I knew Chloe and I knew Toni, and I think we kind of talk about that in the film, the two people. So many people, when we were touring the film in America in theaters, so many people came up to all of us, you know, on the team, and were in tears, you know, very moved by the film, because they'd maybe met her once, she'd signed a book or something, but she was much more than that to them. She was a life-changing force. And I think that's what you're kind of dealing with here. This is a person who really changed lives all over the world, not just African Americans in America. This is someone who is universally respected and loved.
Yeah, thank you. A much lighter question, but I'm guessing very important to the person who asked it. Did you ever taste Toni's famous carrot cake? And if so, could you describe it in 3 words?
I did taste it. That's 3 words. It was better than you can even imagine. Yes. She had a little twinkle in her eye when I was eating it, because we were kind of joking about it. And it was, you know, it was a life-changing experience for carrot cake. Yes. I love that part of the film. I think it humanizes her in a beautiful way. And it's true, you know, that she really made the greatest carrot cake of all time.
Did your favorite personal memory of her make it into the film in some way?
You know, I was with Toni so many different times, and she's really one of the great influences on my life. I've been very lucky as a photographer and filmmaker. I've met everyone, you know, so many famous people. And a handful of them I've gotten to know very, very well. And I was just so blessed that Toni was one of them. You know, another was my good friend Lou Reed, about whom I made a film as well, the rock musician. And there's something about these great talents that are so inspiring to you yourself, that you learn from them. You know, you can be with Toni and have dinner and be laughing, but you learn something that night as well. And you know, I'm lucky.
Mm. Someone's asked, what do you think Toni would say to a Black woman trying to get into writing?
Well, Toni was very encouraging always. I think that people came to her often trying to get her to read their work, and there's only so much you can do if you're Toni Morrison. There's only so much time you have. But I think Toni spotted talent very quickly in people, and you know, she nurtured talent. I think her work made people want to be a writer. I think you could look at it that way as well. Whether she personally said something to you or not, you got it from her work.
Mm.
Inspiration, I think.
Yeah. Was there anything that you learned on the journey of making the documentary that you didn't know or that surprised you about her?
Sure. You know, I wasn't quite aware of the Random House years because it's not really out there. You know, it's not like you can Google the Random House years and Toni Morrison. It's very limited material. But when we started to look into the authors that she brought to the foreground and the books that she published and the extraordinary work she did in those days, that was new to me. The depth of it was new to me.
Yeah. Someone has asked, is there any organization that they can contribute to towards Toni's legacy that you know of? She has a foundation,
No,
doesn't
I don't know the answer to that. I could find out and let you all know somehow. I don't know if, I know that she has her archive is at Princeton, and I'm sure they would always love to have money to help scan everything. There's 50 miles of boxes or something of her work there.
Yeah, but I'd like to answer that in a way because I see this film as very much part of her legacy, and I think that it's become even more important with obviously her passing and documenting who she was in the world. And I think that there's probably people that haven't heard of Toni. I think if you're in the literary world and the arts world, and this is a massive and wonderful contribution in terms of introducing people, but for those of us who are fans, I mean, how delicious to have that experience as well. I remember watching it the second time and going, what books am I going to reread?
Right.
What else find out about her? And it just is so reinvigorating in terms of energy and time.
I think that's very true. And I did feel that it was important to make a film about her life, that film has a place that other art forms, can't quite fill. And I think Toni understood that there was something about filmmaking that was different, and it was a way to tell her story that wasn't a book, that wasn't a biography. She never wanted to write an autobiography. She refused to, and she wouldn't allow any biographies. So it is kind of a miracle, because this is a kind of biography of Toni Morrison, if you will.
Yeah, and it's clear that she trusted you implicitly in order to be able to do that. So we're coming to the end of our time. And it's been such a pleasure and an honor to talk to you, Timothy. And, your body of work as well is just, from the Blacklist to the Women's List, and as you're saying, all of the different ones. I'm now going to go and look at the ones that I haven't watched. But thank you for bringing, you know, those films, this film into the world for us to be inspired and touched and reminded. I think the biggest thing I was reminded of is to hold your voice and be authentically who you are. And that's amazing, amazing, amazing gift. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much. Thank you all for watching the film.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank as well Bertha Dockhouse and Genesis Cinema and Republic Film Distribution and all of the people that made this Q&A possible today. And for all of you who've watched the film, please, I always say, tweet and twat and all that Gucci stuff. Keep spreading the word. It's a wonderful film, and I think it's such an important one. So thank you once again, Timothy.
Thank you very much.